Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. So I'm continuing on my Director Retrospective looking at Guillermo Del Toro and looking at his variety of films. So today I'll be looking at Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2 Golden Army. Both films star Ron Perlman as Hellboy as the main hero, and he's fantastic. Selma Blair also is in it and does a really great job in the film as well. Doug Jones is sort of disappears ultimately. He plays three characters, but he disappears in Abe Sapien. For those who haven't seen Hellboy, he's unlike any superhero you've really experienced before. He's big, he's red, and he needs a hug, not a cape. And it really looks at when the forces of darkness gathering to hasten the apocalypse, there's no one else you'd rather have by your side than Hellboy. I think these films are visually extraordinary. Del Toro has a really great way of creating really colourful and interesting designs of creatures and characters, and this is a great example of it. Most of it's based upon Dark Horse graphic novel by Mike Mignola, and Del Toro takes those characters, but he does something different when he introduces a love story. He adds a lot in the first film anyway, that sort of was different to what Mike had done, but Mike was on board with it, and the collaboration between these two was just fantastic. And in the first film, Khalil Roden plays Rasputin, and I think he's a really great character in this film. I think he's a really great villain in this. He's a character I find really fascinating to watch, and he's kind of really interesting on screen. This film really focuses on how Rasputin ultimately opens this portal to this alternate universe where Hellboy comes out of and he gets sucked into it. And this is where we sort of first meet Hellboy in 1944 during World War II. And it looks at John Hurt's character and him trying to stop the Nazis and how Hitler's looking into the occult. And this sort of brings all that to motion, and he ultimately finds Hellboy and takes him in and ultimately becomes his surrogate father. And then it really looks at how Hellboy is part of this team that's protecting the world, but he's got to stay hidden. There are videos of him and blurred photos, but no one really knows if he exists or not. And they're all trying to work it out, and he sort of works within the shadows of everything, and because he's worried what people might think, or the group he's working for are worried what people might think of him. And it's really about them trying to stop Rasputin and other creatures, and he has to fight a big creature at the end of this film, which is really great, and it really has a lot of heart too. The relationship between Hellboy and his surrogate father is really fantastic, played by John Hurt, and just their relationship's great. And when John Hurt's character dies, you really feel the connection between these two, and you can understand why Hellboy does what he does. And there's a really great love story as well between Selma Blair's character Liz and Hellboy, and that there's a bond between them, and they both have these extraordinary abilities, but are scared to sort of connect to each other or band together or become close. And I think this is really great. It adds a lot of heart and depth to the characters that is much different than your run-of-the-mill superhero movie, or this isn't a skewed superhero movie in many ways. He's more of an anti-hero, but he's very capable and strong, and he knows what's right and wrong, and he tries to do the right thing no matter what, which I really love. We're ultimately introduced to John Myers, played by Rupert Evans. And he's sort of the eyes into the world. He's a young Quantico FBI agent who's been, sent there to ultimately look after Hellboy. And he's the person we really see the world through. He's the person we first see Hellboy as a grown man. And we get to see the world that he inhabits and part of it. And I think that was a great added thing that Del Toro put into this film, where you really feel for this particular character, and he's the eyes into the world as a normal person into this sort of magical and fictional world that we get to see through. And he's sort of brilliant, and it's a really fun and entertaining movie. There's a lot of humor to it. It feels like a bit like Del Toro, but not completely, where the second one feels much more like a Del Toro film than the first. But I still really love this. All the acting's solid in it. I think Ron Perlman's fantastic. He's the best Hellboy, even though David Harbour does the best he can with the new Hellboy reboot, which I didn't really care much for. I think Perlman is really my Hellboy, and Del Toro's the only one who should really direct this, and I would have loved to have seen a third one. But Perlman brings such realism and gravity. He's an actor who's done this sort of beast prosthetic work for a number of years. He started out in Beauty and the TV show The Beauty and the Beast in the 90s with Linda Hamilton. He's not a stranger to being done up in prosthetics and be able to create a really interesting, colourful and believable character. And he's fantastic here. He's one of the best things about these two films. I think Selma Blair's really great. She plays a character who has sort of telekinesis, but it's to do with fire. And I really love that, and how she can't control it, and and she struggles with it, but she learns to accept it throughout the films. And I think she's really great here, and she works really great next to Ron Perlman. Their relationship and their scenes together are absolutely fantastic to watch. I think an actor that people don't really talk about much, because he's usually under prosthetics and he's playing unique and different characters, is Doug Jones. He's fantastic as Abe Sapien in this film. He's really brilliant. And it's good to see him play a character like this. This is like the second film that he worked with Del Toro, and he played a unique character, and he's fantastic in this film. And I think Doug Jones is an actor who should get more recognition, because he is so talented, and he really is well used within the Del Toro universe. The visual effects in this film are a little dated and don't look fantastic, but I like what he was going through. I like the ideas that Del Toro was aiming at with this film. My favourite sort of scenes within the first film are when we first meet Hellboy and he goes on this first mission and he has to stop these creatures, and we get to see him sort of be who he is and take on these creatures, and they can come back to life after you to kill them. And this whole long sequence at the start is fantastic to watch, and Perlman really shines here. There's more simple and intimate scenes I like, especially between Hellboy and Liz, when he goes to the mental institution that she's staying in to try and stay safe. And their banter between each other when you see them out the front is fantastic as well. And the third act of the film is brilliant. Everything about that's great, and you can really feel the bond and the strength and the heart between these two characters. And it's a great, fun, entertaining movie, a great action film. It is superhero, but it's done in a completely different way, and I really thoroughly enjoyed this film. So Hellboy 2. It brought everyone back. Del Toro was able to make the film he wanted to make, and the second one really felt like a more of a Del Toro film. He was able to create those colourful characters and creatures that he's really well known for, and it's just breathtaking to watch how practical these particular creatures are that he creates, and how they're brought to life by the performers. And there's a new sort of character that comes in who's in charge, and this is played by Seth MacFarlane, which you wouldn't even know because he does this heavy German accent, and he's sort of this creature with this bulb on his head, and it's sort of, he's more of a mist or a matter that fills this suit than he is a physical person anymore after an accident, and he's really great in this as well. This one really focuses on the Golden Army. This was an army that was created for this particular king, and he's able to control them with the crown. The crown is broken into 3 pieces. One is given to the humans, the other 2 is given to his children to sort of protect, and he said he'll never use the army again. And it really looks at his son, played by Luke Gross, which is Prince Nuada. And it sort of looks at how he's trying to get this crown back together, and how he's trying to get their army to uprise and take back the earth from the humans, and to be able to live in the light once again. And he's really great in this, and really shines and has some really great moments, and I really love his performance here. And it's such a great character and sort of villain, like he's trying to do the right thing, but the way he goes about it's pretty, despicable and wrong in many ways. Ron Perlman once again returns, and he's fantastic as well. And Selma Blair's back, and she's sort of as part of the team now, where she wasn't quite at the beginning of the first film. Now she is part of the team, and they're having issues, her and Hellboy as a couple living together. And it's kind of interesting and funny to watch. This film is much more funny than the first film in many ways. The humor's really great, and it just feels such an entertaining, colourful world. I love we get to go to, I think it's the fairy markets, where we get to see inside this world of these fantastical creatures that sort of reminds me of Brothers Grimm and things like that. These sort of dark characters that we get to see. And in the market, there's so many colourful and interesting designs of creatures and people that inhabit this world. It's fantastic to watch. And it really, for the first time, I felt the second film was much better than the first, in that it really felt more like Del Toro. The creatures we get to see, they're very practical, like I said earlier, and it's good to see how they inhabit the world and the characters that they are. And the whole world is fantastic. And I would really love to have seen a TV series based on Hellboy, or that sort of character, or that sort of world, because I think it's fantastic and I loved everything about it. This film really looks at Hellboy sort of questioning things. He finally gets to show himself to the public, which he's really excited about. He wants to be known. He doesn't want to be in hiding anymore. He wants to get rid of the garbage truck that they come in usually, and he just wants to be seen. And upon being seen, the public's scared of him. And he doesn't really like that. He feels like he's some sort of outcast and outsider, where all he wants to do is help them, but they don't accept him for who he is because of the way he looks, and they just think he's a monster. And I thought this was a great development for the character in many ways, and added a lot of heart and interesting elements that we get to see. We get to see Hellboy in a different light, and I really like that. And there's also this whole thing where he comes up against the prince, unleashes this creature that once it hits water, it grows into this big sort of tree, forest looking creature that's huge, and he ultimately has to kill it. And the prince says to him, they don't accept you. This is who you are. If you kill this creature, you're killing part of yourself. But he has to do it anyway to protect him. But I really loved that, where he starts to question things, whether he is part of this world, or if he should kill these creatures that he's fighting against, or just allow them to exist because they're not hurting anybody. And I kind of like that. It sort of asks many more questions. It looks at Liz being pregnant and the effect that has on Hellboy. Hellboy nearly dies in this, where he gets stabbed in the chest, and the way he goes about getting that out is really fantastic. I think this ups the ante in many ways. It gives Abe Sapien, played by Doug Jones, much more to deal with. He sort of falls in love, and we get to see much more of him, and they expand his character much more. It feels like a family, and that's what Del Toro seems to be doing, expanding the relationships between these family. It feels a lot like what James Gunn did with Guardians of the Galaxy. The first one was sort of the entertaining and the action film and introduction to these particular characters. And the second one was really about the family unit and the evolving of the character and adding a bit of heart and depth to the characters that we didn't quite see in the first film. And that's exactly what happens in these films. There's much more depth in the second film, and that's why I think I enjoy it much more. And this time around, Doug Jones plays not only Abe Sapien, but he plays Angel of Death and another character. And he's just completely covered head to toe in prosthetics, so you don't really know when it's him or not. And I really like that. He's able to get lost in these prosthetics, but he's able to play many characters because we don't know it's him, which is fantastic, and he's such a brilliant actor. The scenes I really liked in this is sort of the first mission that they have to go on, where they have to go to this auction house where everybody's dead and they don't really know why, and there's no bodies or anything. And it turns out there's little creatures with sharp teeth that are known as tooth fairies, like dark forest sort of characters that attack the teeth and bone, and they ultimately eat everybody. And this scene's really great because Liz sort of uses her abilities and burns the whole thing, and then Hellboy gets thrown out a window, and that's how the whole world gets to know and gets to see him, and I really love that. I liked all this stuff when we get to the fairy markets. I really like that. We get to see the world. I think the prince was a really great character when we get to see him do what he does best. And we're just introduced to a lot more colourful characters, and that's the elements I really loved. And yet again, it has some great intimate scenes where Hellboy and Abe Sapien are sort of in love with these girls, and they're sort of on, in the doghouse on the outside, and they're ultimately getting drunk and talking about their feelings and listening to these romantic romance songs. And it's such a great scene. It's fun and entertaining, and you get a real sense of who these people are. And it's a real emotional punch in many ways, and I loved it. Ultimately, they have to go and find the prince and rescue the princess. And so they go into this particular underworld ultimately, where we get to see what this place looked like. And ultimately, Hellboy being stabbed in the chest, he has to go and get this removed, and we meet the Angel of Death. And this character's fantastic, played by Doug Jones, really tall and creepy, and has like this wood sort of face. And it has these wings that when it come up, it has eyes on the wings. Oh, and it's so fantastic. Such a brilliant design. It's so fun. And Doug Jones breathes such life into this character. I really love watching him in every aspect of this character. He says to Liz, if I save him, he will end the universe, end the world. Do you really want that to be? Or do you want him to die and that's sort of it and it won't happen? And she really wants him to come back, so that's what she says. And he says, he will create the destruction of the universe. And she says, I will face that when I come to it. And I really love that too. And just that whole sequence is brilliant. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think Del Toro is one of the great visual storytellers. And he really loves creatures and monsters and pays tribute to them. And I think it's a really beautiful love letter to these particular characters, especially this scene in the whole film. And obviously the third act, the last part of the film where they have to fight these metal creatures, is brilliant as well. You get to see them try and take them down, and Hellboy battling the prince, and how that sort of works, and the use of colors and lighting and everything that's happening, and all very practical sets, is just brilliant. What I really like too is we get to see John Hurt once again playing his father character, Trevor. We see Hellboy as a young teenage boy in 1955, and he's watching television, and his father tells him he needs to go to bed, and he says to him, "Tell me a story and I will go to bed." So he starts to tell him about this golden army, and we get to see this through animation, like sort of stop motion sort of animation. We get to see how this army was created and what they were used for, and how they're discarded and left behind. And I really love this, and this sort of sets up the Golden Army that takes place later in the film. And I think this is a brilliant way into that. And ultimately this film is just pure and adulterated fun. Great characters, a lot of humour, some brilliant scenes, and another example of Del Toro being a very creative and unique filmmaker. And the stories he wants to tell, and the characters he creates, and the monsters and creatures that he designs, and how brilliantly they're brought to life in his films. And it has a lot of heart and humour, and I really loved it. So if you haven't seen the Hellboy films, I highly recommend them. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.